Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host, and this week's guest is Michael Ravenwood. He is the CEO and creative designer for Skyfire Arts, which he presents an interesting, unique view of how the interconnectivity of energy is present in everything, and we're going to have a great conversation. Make sure you like and subscribe. That's something I often forget. Please do so. We'll be right back.
Explore the thoughtless sphere. Embark on a life-changing journey of self-discovery. Embrace harmony with self, with others, with Earth. One world in a new world. Zen Benefiel skillfully ignites conversations, guiding guests to reveal personal journeys and perspectives. Listeners are inspired to seek knowledge and find wisdom in their own lives. Join this transformative journey as we navigate the depth of human experience.
Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. By all means, like and subscribe. I keep forgetting to say that. I'm Zen Benefiel, your host, and this week's guest is Michael Ravenwood, who is the CEO and creative director for Skyfire Arts. And what they do is they use spectacular entertainment to show how interconnected we are and for personal growth. So it's going to be a phenomenal conversation. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Hmm. Hmm. So, Michael, it's so great to have you here, man. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I know we're going to go deep and wide, and man, you're just a guy to do it. Thanks for being here.
You're most welcome. I'm very excited for our conversation. The last one we had was really brilliant, so I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, good, good. So, in the beginning, there was no, I'm not gonna go that way. So we talk about the balance between inner and outer life, and that we're usually bereft of the inner conversations with each other, so that we can begin to understand the relative reality that we experience together. And the inner conversations are imperative in order to establish a balanced inner and outer perspective. So when did you, and I know with what you're doing, man, your mind and your spirit is just so connected. When did you first notice that interconnectedness when you were young? Did you, what happened? Were there some events and how did you perceive it and how did you experience from others?
Well, the sort of inner exploration began very early for me. I remember walking home from school sometimes and just like a bolt out of the blue, certain thoughts and ideas would hit me, and I would sit down on the curb with my feet in the gutter and just like grab a pencil and a piece of paper and just start writing and writing about how I was understanding what I was going through and what the nature of reality was. When I was a young teenager, I would even like go out in front of my parents' house, smoke cigarettes at the time. I would just smoke cigarettes, philosophizing in the middle of the street. And I had the cops called on me actually several times for philosophizing. And it was a really
Are you sure it was philosophizing or the fact you were blocking traffic?
it was late at night.
Probably a
There was
little of both, huh?
no cars around. It was some nosy neighbor that just didn't like the idea that I was hanging out talking to myself in the middle of the street, which I get, I suppose,
That would be a little disturbing to most people that don't have a clue, right?
Yeah.
And yet, as a kid, who do you have to talk to except yourself and whoever else is listening invisibly?
Yeah, no, I had some really profound thought even very early on. I had this notion that later I understood to be like the entire Hindu perspective on God. I thought to myself, like, okay, if I was God, and if I had all power, I would do whatever I want. I would just keep doing whatever I want, whatever. And then eventually it would get boring. Like I would just be able to do whatever. So I bet what I would do is I would create a space behind me that I couldn't see, right? Because if I'm God, I'm all powerful. I can even create a place that I can't see. And then I would like throw something over my shoulder and turn around to see what happened. Like that's where I would get as God, because you would just, eventually run out of things that, you would do. that you knew you wanted to do because you'd done it
Sure,
all already for an eternity. And then
sure.
later I
And
realized
none
that
of
that,
that being any kind of malevolent, right, activity. It's all the self-exploration as to really what you can do.
yeah, and so that's what I understand. Like the Hindus believe is that essentially, like God puts a bit of itself into each one of us as a
Hmm.
conscious experience, so that we can like awaken to everything again. Because actually, it's the awakening which is the beauty, not the knowing
Right,
everything already, but the
right.
awakening process that is really the most beautiful and the experience of life as being precious, and which we can't really experience if you're immortal and all powerful. But yeah, one
I don't know
experience.
about that.
Oh,
The Vedas, which, the Hindus got this philosophy from, say that, in essence, paraphrased for, Sanskrit poems that are quite long. In essence, though, they say that we're all divine threads, incarnate, connected to source, and capable of God consciousness. So what would that mean, right? Is there, as we've talked about, cosmic consciousness being condensed into form, just unaware, it's in each of us, right? And I think that's how we recognize each other at the level or state that we're in that ascension process. However, when you're in that place, you have infinite intelligence available to you and your specific questions, right? Your specific divine thread, if you will, that allows you to play God, right? And um, find those salient points within you that allow you to embody what I perceive as a perfected form, fit, and function in the world, if we were to look at it as a natural design feature.
hmm. Yeah, well, I am still
That's an
like very
interesting
much
one, isn't it?
open to understanding, what is really going on with all that. But I for many years, didn't believe in God, and really the first moment that I came to an understanding that I can call belief, was actually from a moment I had on a bus where I was just riding into school, and I was it was early in the morning. I was rubbing my face trying to wake myself up, and suddenly I like remembered that I had made love that morning, and I looked out the window, and something about the giant redwood trees swaying up behind the school I was pulling into and the rocking of the bus, and boom, I was the bus and the people on the bus. I was the earth and the trees and the earth and wind of the trees. And I became everything. And then I came back in my body, and what transformed within me, like, goes along three specific dimensions. One, I realized that every moment of a mortal life is tinged with just a hint of fear, fear that something outside us might hurt us or something we have might be taken away. And in that moment, I realized that all fear is based on the premise that we're separate and not also one with everything, or that we're not just this kind of
Exactly.
like, part of
Yeah.
the
And you
universe.
had the experience of it that
Yeah,
gave you that experiential evidence and truth for you that nobody is going to change your mind about.
yeah, because it was like a direct visceral experience. So what happened is all fear just fell away because I recognized, yes, in a certain sense I'm separate, but actually in a deeper and more profound sense, I am what the universe is doing to itself. Like 4
Mhm.
billion years ago, there was a seething ball of magma here, and it evolved and evolved, and now the seething ball of magma looks like this and talks to itself, dances with itself. Even 14, billion years ago, approximately, bang, the universe started and it evolved, 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 and now this is what the universe looked like. I am an aspect of the universe, and I got to
Sure.
really experience that. So
And
fear
it seems
felt.
to be, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say that fear basically fell away, and what replaced it was a radiant bliss, like I was
Yes.
penetrating and being penetrated by every point in time and space. Yeah, and that was the experience I had, and
And
yeah,
that experience of oneness is individuated in you because it was your experience, and yet everyone is capable of having that,
I agree.
right?
Yeah.
So how do we navigate that? Do we, like you mentioned, the love and fear thing, and we spoke about this just before coming on, this mm, navigation through that cognitive dissonance that's created with the love and fear belief system, right? Whereas you were saying in that place of total connectedness, that's total love. That's unconditional. There are no barriers. You're connected to everything. Now,
You're
how
aware,
that
you're aware of your connection with everything. Yeah, because we're always connected, but we're
great
not always
point.
tuned into that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you have to be aware. Otherwise, you end up unconsciously, like Jung says, we try to make the unconscious conscious. Well, the unconscious is operating probably, 85, 90% of the time, and we're not even aware of it, yet it's operating on our programmed beliefs that we feed it. Now, if we were to change those beliefs, what would we experience? The
Yeah, and
the
and
fear.
that very idea that you're sharing right now, how does one transform one's beliefs? That is such a core piece because
Mhm.
our entire trajectory into the future is based on our beliefs. If we believe certain things, then when a certain thing happens to us, based on our beliefs, we're going to interpret that thing that's happening and we're going to make our actions based on what our beliefs are about what's possible and what's important, right? Our value
Right.
system.
Right. And we may
And
not even know what those core beliefs are in our
most
reaction
people
to it. Rather
most
than
people
if
don't.
we are aware, then maybe we would respond rather than have a knee jerk in some
Yeah,
situation.
and I
Right.
love just this very base level of trying to presence people to the fact that they have a value system because most people just take for granted like, oh, well, this is important and this is not important. And they don't know, well, actually it's a choice to believe that these things are important and these are not important. And there may be even things that you're not even aware of, layers of what's going on that
Right.
would be really important to you if you only knew that they were real.
And that leads into the Tao, right? I had a wonderful mentor, Kai D, played Wo Fat on the original Hawaii Five-O.
Oh,
He had a doctorate in theology and was rector for a Taoist sanctuary here in Tempe. He was one of my first guests on my original show, One World. And he'd said to me, in the Taoist way, it's either desirable or undesirable. And that's something you can sense as well as, you can go beyond your belief system, which is totally in your head,
mhm.
and sense it with your body as to whether there's resonance or not with what you're being presented with. Have you found that to be true in some of the things? Because I know with the work you do, you're really sensitive.
I think that there are a couple of different ways to look at that. So emotions, in my perspective, in my experience, can come from distinct places, several distinct places.
Hmm.
One is more of an intuitive place, and one is more of an intellectual interpretation place. Meaning, if
Hmm.
somebody says something to you, a lot of times the feelings you'll have around it are based on how you interpret it. Let's say for example, they say, "Hey, have you taken out the trash?" Now, let's say they ask you that question and you infer that or you believe that they're implying that you should have already taken out the trash, right? So your emotional response might be like, "Well, no, because I was doing all these other things," or whatever your
Yeah,
emotional
that
response.
sounds like a husband and wife
But is that
conversation.
right, right, right? But it's based on, but that feeling, that emotion is based on your mental perception. And as you
Sure.
get more and more attuned
Absolutely.
with meditation, you can actually watch, like somebody says something, and you can watch yourself get either really happy about it or really sad or really frustrated, angry about it, and just notice, like, oh, look, I had a profound emotional response to what this person said. And then you can even take a step, back and say, I wonder if they really meant what I thought they meant by what they said. So then you can ask them, were you implying that I should have already done it? Or and then the person might be like, oh no, I was just asking because I thought I would take it out right now as I'm going out to the car to leave for work, whatever. And then
Yeah,
you
yeah.
might be like, oh, okay. Well, thank you so much. I got really busy. Yes, if you would take that, that'd be awesome. So
And
that's
in that process, your emotions are going like this, right?
right? Yeah, so that's one place that feelings can come from, desirable, undesirable, whatever,
Mhm.
that's a place that feelings come from is intellectual interpretations, right? And that does have to do with your belief systems.
Sure.
But then there also, in my experience, there are emotions or feelings which come straight from, you might call it a sense of things that
A
is not
gut feeling.
necessarily interpreted through the mind.
Yeah.
And I've had some of the most kind of profound experiences that I've had in my life come straight like I mean, I've had a couple of like straight up psychic things happen in my life that gave me a feeling, and I
Care
was
to
like,
share?
okay, yeah, so okay, well, I'll even use one in reverse. So one of the most
All right.
profound things that ever happened to me was that I at this one festival, I was hanging out with my friend's daughter Fiona, and she had a new wand. It was her birthday wand, and I'm this funny character, so I'm like, "Oh, you're not going to turn me into a frog, are you?" And she's like, "Ha ha ha, bing," and then I turn it and I hop around on the ground for a while, and then she turns me into a monkey. I caper about. So I have this whole game with Fiona, right? So then months later, out of the blue, I haven't talked to my friend in quite a while. She's playing on the floor with her daughter, and her daughter just kind of like sits up out of nowhere and goes, "I turned him into a frog." And her mom is like, "What?" And she's like, "That man, I turned him into a frog and a newt and a salamander." And then she was like, "Oh, Michael. Oh yeah, you were playing with him at the festival." Da 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 da. And then ring ring, the phone rings, and it's me on the phone. So my friend Siobhan was like, "Oh my God, you'll never believe what just happened." Like out of nowhere, Fiona just started talking about you, and then you called. I've had that happen a few times. I think I have a kind of I don't know, a very clear intention. So I think kids can see,
That and you've got a
feel me coming.
connection too, right? These are
Is it?
people that you know and love. And I think it happens more readily with that. Being adopted, my adopted father and I had this amazing psychic bond
Mm,
that was, beyond any blood lineage. Um, and he was Piscean and I'm Cancerian, so we're both kind of the spirit, if you will. And I think that makes a difference as well. These kinds of things we have normal experiences of, right? And usually it's like, oh, that was really cool, and we blow it off, right? We don't give it any more attention as to, how'd that happen? And can I do it again?
mhm. Yeah, I actually find it fascinating to think about how we can cultivate the kind of state in which those things are just more apparent to us. And what I've noticed is that it tends to be when I'm really not like thinking about anything or directing my conscious, I'm just kind of relaxing and allowing things to happen,
Hmm.
that those kind of impressions can come more clearly, which is why I think, meditation is such a powerful way to get in touch with our intuition because we're literally practicing being aware, but being relaxed,
And
not
quiet and having a quiet mind, which is where things can get through. As a kid, you remind me that when I was first told I was adopted, right? My sister had just come home. I was 4.5. My parents tell me because they feel it's time to know, right? And the fact that there was no process before my sister came home, other than my awareness that she was going to. Well, I was standing on afterwards, I had the normal questions, but had one that resided for a while. And that was if I'd already been to Sunday school quite a number of times, and I thought, if I have a father and mother in heaven, can I talk to them?
Mm,
And a 4.5-year-old with those kind of thoughts, that's pretty bizarre to begin with, let alone what happened in the following few weeks or month. I was standing on a landing one evening looking out our front window, and all of a sudden I hear this voice say, "Hey, you." It was deeper than anything you could imagine and louder than anything I've ever heard. So loud that instead of engaging it, I turned around and I asked my mother, who was sitting 15, 20 feet away, if she heard it. And I knew she should have. It was that loud. And she says, "No, what voice? I didn't hear any voice." I'm like, huh. So fast forward a few weeks, maybe months. Dad worked nights, so he would take a nap between 8:30 and 10, and I would and Mom would be in the kitchen, so I'd be in the living room some nights, and the curtains would be open, light would be on. I would stand in front of the window and project that "Hey you" out, hoping for a return. I didn't know any better, right? Why not try it? So didn't realize that at the time There's 70,000 thoughts a day that we have, and especially with a kid, probably more than that, because your mind's just rolling, right? You don't stop. Well, I finally stopped one evening and I got quiet, not realizing it. And I heard the voice. It returned. So that taught me early on the necessity of being quiet. Now, whether I was able to do that or not on a regular basis is an entirely another story, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's why daily practice is such a vital piece
Oh,
because
sure. Well, as a kid, you don't know that that's
right,
there.
right, right.
It just comes naturally. And it did. I didn't have to practice. All I had to do was remember that moment of stillness and go back to it. And then eventually, that moment of stillness resided, kind of resolved into another Hindu, the Shabda, which is known as the sound current, which is the vibrations of all the life on the planet. So that's the interconnectedness that we hear in that silence, or can. And so that allowed me to tune in. And then there were some instances, you probably had this happen, when you meditate sometimes, do you feel yourself drop into other realms or expand into other realms?
I can say that I've definitely had the experience of my awareness expanding into the space around me. I did a 10-day, 10-hour a day meditation retreat called Vipassana, which you probably are familiar with. And
Those are
yeah, and
awesome.
yeah, it was really profound. And
Yeah.
I actually experienced, and it was one of the most bizarre sensations or whatever. I actually experienced myself kind of going out with the breath and like experiencing myself as a larger thing than my body and then like coming back in my body. And I just had some very bizarre kind of
Mhm.
experiences of that during that 10-day meditation retreat.
That's an awesome experience. And yes, I will recommend that to anyone that is interested. Phenomenal. Your life
I
will
agree. And
absolutely
the
change.
most remarkable thing about it is it's totally free. They will let you
Yeah.
come for 10 days and feed you and house you and teach you meditation without cost. And they just have so many
Well, there
volunteers
is cost.
work.
Your time and your
Okay.
commitment.
Okay.
That's
Okay. True enough.
valuable, and that's why the reciprocation occurs.
Right. And I'm just saying, monetarily, there's no investment. There is just the investment, as you say, of your time, your energy, and your commitment. And it's not a small thing. It definitely is intense to do. But there are so many people who have gained such tremendous benefit from it that they have volunteers enough to like make it happen.
Sure.
So I think it's really remarkable. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, that brings up another point, literally a point of awareness, right? And from quantum physics, we understand we're all energy. So the more we become aware of that energy expanding and contracting, like you experienced, right? That's from that point of reference that we have, because we only have one point. It has different aspects, right? But we only have one being in our body. Would you agree? We may
Well,
have
I would
access,
say
but we only
there
have one experience.
There is only one being here, and it's us. That's what I had in that moment. That's how I began to believe in God, is that I went from thinking God is a word defined as an old man in the sky ready to throw me in a lake of fire forever if I don't believe the right things. And all of a sudden, in that experience of everything on the bus, I recognized that, like, oh, there is nothing that is not God. Like I began to equate
Right.
the word God with reality itself. So I went 180 degrees from a person who was a total atheist at the time to a person now if you try to convince me there isn't a God, you might as well try and convince me there isn't reality itself, right?
Right.
But so I do believe that there is only one being, and it's us. It's this reality. But then I also recognize what I think you're going at, is that we have one locus of awareness and attention that we as beings in this physical realm or whatever you want to call it
Hmm.
get to have, and that there is like like there's exercises of like, okay, now put all of your attention in your big toe, or now put all your attention in like these, or in your breath, or whatever it is. And you can play with what it means to drive your awareness into these various places, but we only have that one kind of point of
Right.
attention.
Whether it's in our body or not. Don Juan taught Castaneda how to move his assemblage point, is what he
Mhm.
called that point of awareness,
Right,
right?
right.
And you can move it around with practice. Sometimes it happens inadvertently, out of body experiences, for instance, where,
Mhm.
you'll have a different view and you'll be able to see your body. Well, that's still that reference point, right?
Yeah.
Just in a different vibratory realm.
Yeah, well, I have actually one of the spookiest, kind of coolest stories out of my life that talks a little bit about how you can that talks
Bifurcate?
about how you can kind of divide. So I was helping my friend move, and she has a black cat at the time named Bane, and all of a sudden Bane just starts like looking around the room as if there's something like particular that it's tracking, right? And we're looking
Yeah.
around, and we're like, there is nothing in the room that's
Yeah.
tracking.
Where's the
We can
orb?
see, right? Yeah, what is going on? And so then I decided like, oh, this is a really cool moment for an experiment. What if there is a spirit in the room, or what if it can see something that I cannot? So I went up on the bed and I sat meditation style, and I started doing this this I don't know, you call it a prayer or whatever you want to call it. It's this exercise that I learned when a friend was doing this crystal bowl meditation for me one time, and it just kind of dropped in. I've only had a few times in my life where I was just like something dropped whole into me, like a
Hmm.
poem, and I just wrote out the poem just as it dropped into me. I didn't like craft it. It just happened, right? So this meditation was, there is nothing but beauty and truth and health within this circle. Within this circle, it is all joy and love and strength. And, I just kind of like you basically sing all the things that are the things you want to see, and and there's nothing but that within this circle.
Hmm.
And the cat looks around the room, and then looks right above my head, and then down, 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 and looks into my eyes. And for like 2 minutes, like, which is an internally, it felt like 10 minutes or whatever. That's
Sure.
fine. But it was actually 2 minutes,
Little
about.
celebratory
And
moment, right?
yeah, and the cat is looking in my eyes, and I'm just like doing this prayer. But then there's another part of me. There's the part of me that's like saying the prayer, right? That's the conscious part of me. Then there's the other part where like random thoughts just kind of like start bubbling up. And this random thought of like killing and eating the cat came up. And you don't know where these thoughts come from. It's just like, just suddenly it was like that. And then a third part of my mind, or whatever, was like, whoa, what would happen? Because I'm experimenting here. I'm like, what would
Sure.
happen if I held that thought? So I brought that thought back into my mind instead of the peace and love and health and strength and whatever. I like brought that thought back into my mind, and it was like two set. It was like 1,000, 1,000. The cat leapt up in the air, like feet into the air, and landed behind this box, and then like peered out from behind the box at me. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Like that really just happened. Like I literally just changed what was in my mind, and then the cat focused on me. And then I changed what was in my mind, and then the cat leaps up, and you know what I mean? Like I was just like, I was kind of freaking out because I am a person who's like not seen ghosts, or not like I haven't, I've, my I have had like weird dreams that came true, and I've had whatever certain things happen,
Right.
but I haven't like seen anything in my reality that's like, something that's quote unquote not there, whatever. So at the
Maybe that's
time, I was
part
kind
of
of freaking
the way you learn the audio, visual, and kinesthetic, and that you're more receptive at different levels. And this is one that happens to be it.
right. And so the cat, I thought I don't want to leave it like this. So then I envision myself, I look at the cat, and I envision in my mind that I'm laying in an alley, and I don't know where I get the whatever, but I'm laying in an alley and I'm starving and I'm petting the cat. And that's what I envision in my head. And then I say in my head, not even if I were starving, not even if I were dying, not like I wouldn't harm you. And the cat kind of creeps out and creeps out. And then I put my hand out, and then the cat rubs, and then I rub the cat. And then it is at this point that my friend Elise looks at me, and because she's sitting here the whole time, like watching the cat, and then watching me sit up on the bed without saying anything, and then all of a sudden watching the cat lock eyes with me for 2 minutes. She's just sitting there, like watching this whole, and then seeing the cat jump up, And so as soon as the cat, like I pet the cat, she's like, okay, what just happened, dude? Because this is a really weird, event that just occurred. I got
Well,
to
and
wait.
the cool thing is you had a witness,
Yeah. Yeah. It
right?
was
It
really
wasn't
different.
just your imagination. There was, you had a reflection of what was happening inside of you. And man, those are precious because they really lock in that reality that there is something greater. I've had similar things happen to me, and one of them happened in front of a group of people.
Mm.
Witnessed it. And, because you wonder, right? Because they are so different than our normal awareness. Now, have you noticed over the years of practice that that awareness has almost become second nature or first nature, to where you sense a reason to stop and be still for a moment?
That's a really good point. And it's funny. I just want to take it back for 1 second and say the
Sure.
whole reason that whole story came up is because you were talking about the one assemblage point or the one attention point. And what I was trying to kind of um, illuminate with that story was that there is the one point of conscious attention, but there's also this antenna kind of like quality of our brain that's just
Mhm.
receiving thoughts from outside or where who knows where thoughts occur to us from, right?
Well,
But there's
yeah,
this other part of our
according
mind that's
to Irvin Laszlo, that would be our higher self, right? The pure self, right? Had an experience that Lube and I were meditating out in the backyard one afternoon, and I was watching my thinking.
mm,
And as I'm watching my thinking, then I started interacting with myself and wondering why I'm thinking that or the other. And then there's a third voice that pops in and
mm.
says something. And I was like, okay, where did that come from?
Yeah,
Right?
right.
Because it saw what I was doing and took me to another level of my awareness with it. So would that not also be me wanting to be more
Yeah,
aware?
well, that is it, that's the question is where does me begin and end, right? So in answer to your question about are there times, with my practice that I've come to get silent, it's funny enough that recently it's my experience playing pickleball that has begun to like bring me to this place where I'm remembering to get really silent. And what it is that every time after a point is scored or after a person is after a ball is like transferred, from one side to the other, I've taken it as a trigger to like drop myself back in to like the silent and
Mhm.
still place. Like every single time I go to serve, every single time I go to receive a serve, I like I just I relax my whole body and just kind of like, and I find that when I'm remembering to do that, I'm a way better player.
Oh,
Like I just like I get this whole I basically I think what I'm doing is I'm starting to tap into flow state in an intentional way where I'm remembering
right.
to
Exactly.
relax but be present, you
And
know.
that's a disciplined habit that's developed. Sometimes it's a spontaneous, remembering, oh yeah, I need to do this. The more
Mm.
you practice it, the more you live it. And it, reminds me of what T. Harv Eker said years ago. I went to one of his millionaire mindset weekends, and he says, you know what you do anywhere, you do everywhere.
Yep.
Wow. That got me going, wait a minute. Because first thing you want to do is disagree, right? And I think that it's kind of our nature, where when we get something new, the first thing we want to do is confront it rather than emerge in a different way, rather than to allow it to seep in and gestate and then give us a different opinion because of our own bias and prejudice. It gets in the way, right? Our perception is managed by our perspective. And if our perspective is locked in
Hmm.
and we're not open, then we're going to want to argue and defy, as opposed
Yeah. So
to, well, that's interesting. Tell me more.
Yeah, I
right?
find that what you've just shared is something that speaks to the heart of how I really have come to look at truth, right? So let's look at the statement that was made that that the way I heard it was the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, right? And it is a perspective which comes from the understanding that whatever state you tend to be in, you're going to be doing everything from that state, right?
Hmm.
So
Oh, we had some
there is a
vicarious agreement there too.
yeah, there's a
We had
there
a
is
thumbs up.
oh yeah, no, actually my yeah, I have some I can turn that off actually.
No, actually, it was perfectly timed. I love it.
I kind of like it. Well, here, yeah, I'll show you my favorite one. This is my favorite one right here. Oh yeah.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that
All
funny?
right.
Yeah. So
Guy arts,
bottom
guy
line,
you.
yeah, no, it's funny how these little reactions got like I didn't even set them up. They just kind of started happening, and I'm like, I love these,
Sure.
like this is another one of my favorites. Yeah. So so in terms of this understanding the nature of truth through the lens of this particular statement, right? The way you do or one way to say it is the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. And it recognizes that we have a certain state that we tend to operate from. And so
Mhm.
if we're, defaulting to that state, then whether we're playing pickleball or whether we're talking to our wife or whether we're at work doing whatever we're doing, that we're coming from that place when we're doing it. And so that we tend, like, for example, if we tend to be a person who rushes, then we're going to rush through all of those different things.
Mhm.
But then there's
I
also the
prefer to listen to the albums, though.
what do you say?
Rush.
I don't get me started on Tom Sawyer. So I love that song so much.
No,
So
Cinderella
what
Man.
what I'll say is that what I've tried to start doing with every statement of truth or every wisdom or aphorism is I've started to ask myself, how is this true, or when is this true, or under what circumstances is it true, and then under what circumstances is it not true? And I'll just say, like, for example, that it is true that the way you do one thing tends to be the way you do everything, but also people have very specific types of, call them hangups or call them, it could be an advantage actually in certain circumstances, but
Hang-ups, triggers,
example,
you know, point counterpoints.
yeah. So let's say you have a particular set of experiences in your youth around women, or let's say you have a set of experiences in your youth around authority, or whatever it is, that you can actually have a really high functioning ability, for example, outside of that field, where actually it isn't like the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, because the way you're handling most of your life might be really great because you don't have this one hang up. But then when you get around authority or women or whatever it is, that particular hang up may switch the way you treat them
I
or
would,
yourself or your thoughts
I
and
can
stuff like
see that. I would also say the intensity of the moment determines how deep you go and from where you reflect.
that.
And in what you just shared, the normal stuff, not so triggering. The intense moment when you feel like you're in the middle of chaos and have to perform or whatever, right? That's a much more intense feeling that wouldn't come up in the others.
Mm, right.
Uh, True or not, right? There's just a difference of intensity in particular moments, and we all experience that.
Yeah, through different, through our own particular triggers to
Sure.
that. Because one person, and this is something that I really focus on in when I do workshops and things like that, is around how happiness is certainly determined from within, because you can put two people in the same circumstance and one will be perfectly happy, even in elation, and the other one will be totally miserable. So
Hmm.
really it's our perceptions of things that, or our attitude towards things that leads us to have the experience that we're having. And
Sure.
so, yeah.
Well, and again, perception controlled by perspective, right? That person's is happy may have the perspective of I'm part of it all and it's all good. The
Hmm.
person that's miserable, oh man, life is shit and I'm getting more of it,
Yeah.
right? And unfortunately, that because of the overabundance of self-deprecating thoughts among those 70,000 we have a day, the needle moves, right? Now, how do we bring that needle back? How do we balance the EQ, the IQ, the SQ, emotional quotient, intellectual quotient, and spiritual quotient?
Hmm. Interesting. I like this, and I like how we've come back around to that question of how does one modify one's beliefs? Because usually
Mhm.
you come to a belief either because somebody you respected or in a position of authority said something to you at some point when you were a kid, and you just kind of like took it for granted because you're learning so many things from everybody else, and maybe
And you
that person's
trust
been right.
adults, and those are wiser, elder, all that
Yeah,
kind of
maybe that person's been
experts, right?
yeah, maybe that person's been right about 9 out of the 10 or 99 out of the last 100 things they said, but then suddenly they say something that maybe is totally off, but you wouldn't know because you're just a kid. So whatever, we get these beliefs either from, authority figures or people we trust, or we might get them from experiences we've had. Like
Sure.
we speak up in a situation where things are intense, right? And some people might have had the experience where they spoke up and things went really well and people listened to what they had to say and it saved them a lot of trouble. But another person might have spoken up in that moment of truth or whatever, and then all of a sudden they got yelled at and then all these consequences happened or whatever. So what a person believes about speaking up in the moment of truth is going to come from, their experiences. But like we were just talking about with the other example, there might be a set of circumstances where if you speak up, the truth is, speaking up gets you in trouble, whatever. But then there's going to be another circumstance, set of circumstances where speaking up is the most important thing you can do. And
And everybody goes, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you brought
yeah,
that up,"
yeah,
right? Because
exactly.
it's on the mind of everybody.
Right. And so,
Now, if it's not on the mind of everybody and you speak up, that tends to be when that stiff arm occurs.
right, right. And so you learn to be sensitive to your circumstances. Like, am I going to be benefiting everybody, including myself, by speaking up in this circumstance, or is it, or not so much? And so the question of how we can transform our beliefs really, really drives in. And I feel like part of it, coming to new beliefs has to do with experimentation, because if you just keep speaking up, for example, you're going to start noticing, oh, okay, speaking up doesn't just get me, stiff armed. Speaking up
Mhm.
sometimes gets me accolades. Okay, so
Right. Well, you can
my
experience the
belief,
bell curve, right?
yeah, right. There's a certain
All the
circumstance.
different variations that could happen will, and then okay, now what's happening most often, and how do I tweak that within myself to get better results so that the outliers don't happen as much?
Yeah, and so experimentation is one of those huge important ways that we can
Absolutely.
learn to evolve or have our beliefs evolve. And another one is storytelling. And I am so like my whole company, which I guess we didn't talk about or whatever. I'll just share for
Okay.
people who are interested. So in my company, Skyfire Arts, what we do is we wear high voltage protective suits. We become electrified by giant devices known as Tesla coils, and we throw 10-foot bolts of lightning as part of the show. But that is, as you were talking about at the beginning, Zen, designed to promote ecological awareness and personal empowerment. And
Mhm.
ecological awareness, by the way, is the awareness of our intimate connection with everything. Ecology, biology, quantum physics, all of these sciences have proved unequivocally that we are connected intimately and inextricably with everything in our environment, right? So
Right.
ecological awareness could be called unity consciousness, it could be called whatever you want, but it's just our awareness of our connection. And then personal empowerment is
When it's we speak the same thing. This is what I noticed when I did my early shows. I had probably 70 or 80 shows that I did with two guests from disparate backgrounds, same questions, and I learned how to weave what they were saying because they would say, questions about what prompted you to do what you're doing from both inner and outer perspectives,
mm-hmm,
and then what fears did you encounter?
mm-hmm,
And most importantly, how did you overcome them? So, listening to these processes and how people would explain their individual process, they were explaining the same thing in their individuated ways,
yeah,
which gave me an opportunity to say, okay, guys, this is what I see. You're saying the same thing differently, and then find that salient point of agreement that was huge
mm,
because they could see each other better And then that rippled out into their other worlds, right?
Mhm.
That they saw others differently as a result and were able to achieve more fulfillment as a result as well.
Yeah, and what's happening there in my experience is that they are getting to hear each other's story,
Mhm.
and they are using that story as a reflection on their own story. And they're beginning to, it's a kind of
Which
a
is natural, right? Is how do I fit into this? Where, can I relate to this person? And because you're listening through your own dictionary and speaking, and
Mhm.
so you're going to hear, I'll just say trigger words, not that they're triggers, but just words that, you know, um, create
Keyword.
things. They create things, right?
Yeah.
And as you're hearing that, you're interpreting it in your way, and it may not be the same as the others. And that's where that interactive, active listening, for instance, and referencing things. And here's what I think I thought I heard, and is that true? And could you go further on that? Because I think I'm getting it, but I'm not quite sure. And that radical curiosity as opposed to the vehement denial of
Hmm.
and holding that separative place, this is where they could come together and agree. And I think that's a possibility ubiquitously among the planet in being able to get people to have conversations that elevate this sense of connectedness. And we need that today. That's what I'm hoping these conversations will do. And that the like and subscribe button will be hit more often as a result, right? And I think it's important. Now, in your furthering of this, let's just call it work, because I think it's a kind of a overall term that a lot of us use because it's not really work and yet it's work because it takes discipline.
Mm.
The discipline. How do you think this discipline can develop? Because we're looking at making the unconscious conscious, first of all,
Mm.
right? That's the education process that needs to happen in the individual in order for them to recognize their connectivity.
Hmm. Yeah.
How do you see that happening? For instance, in the last few years, we had a golden opportunity with the pandemic to be sequestered and self-examine. What do you see has happened as a result of that?
Wow. Well, I would say that it runs the length and breadth, right? Like so many people did use that experience as a divisive force in their lives and put other people on the other side, of what they
Fear-based.
think is the right thing to happen and all of that, right? But I think that a good portion of people, it seems, did take a step back with it and examine what's going on and notice how many people did choose to be divisive about it and then choose to keep the people in their lives that were not being, choosing that kind of a path. And I
So
think
with
that, I
those,
mean, I'll
would you
tell you
see,
straight
go
up,
ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, just straight up my own experience with the pandemic. I used it to anchor a daily practice. I had still, even up to the pandemic, I had been doing, I'd meditate for a few months and then, whatever would happen and I'd get off. Then I'd be like, oh yeah, no, I need to get back on. I get a few more weeks and then, oh, no, and then
Like
I kind
everything,
of like
right?
was
Temporary and transitory.
right, right, back and forth. Well, I will tell you that it was with the pandemic that I was like, no excuses. Like I am meditating every single day. I'm doing breath work every single day. And I created a spreadsheet. And I later learned actually that this behavior modification method was used, very successfully in a number of different systems and whatever. And I looked up YouTube videos about, how do people actually change their behavior and whatever. And I really like anchored a system where I wrote down on a spreadsheet along the left side, these are all the things I want to do every single day. And then across the top was the date. And then if I did it, I would say, yes, I did it. Or if I did half of it, I'd be like, oh, yeah, I only did half of it. Or if I didn't do it, I would be like, no, I didn't do it. And then at the bottom, at the end of the day, I would reflect and I would say, why? Why didn't I do this or that? Or why did I do everything today? Why did I nail everything today? And I really like gave myself a feedback system and I would understand like, oh, watching videos After dinner, it's pretty much no go. Like I can't, if I watch videos after dinner, I'm not journaling, I'm not doing my yoga, I'm not, but if I read books instead, then all of a sudden like there's this whole other thing. So that's what I'm doing is I'm reading book. And so anyway, I when you talk about discipline, this is the point at which because a lot of people have reported to me that they see me as a very disciplined person. And I'll say that, whatever
You kind
discipline
of
I
go,
have
what?
was not inherent. Like it was cultivated. I had to, practice and practice, but I did get a practice where now, like every single day, I do the same thing every single day. And so when you say what happened out of the pandemic and that reflection, everything, for me personally, I feel like ultimately it was a very positive influence on my life in terms of what my state of being is now on a more consistent basis. Because when we meditate and do breath work and visualization every single day, we tune our state into a certain frequency range.
The antenna that is us is attenuated to a different set of frequencies.
Right, right. And so I feel like, for me and, for a lot of people I know, it ultimately ended up being very positive. But, I know obviously for many people it was
Well, for
not.
some it wasn't. Now,
Yeah.
my point being, the reason I asked that question, because we were talking about changing beliefs. Well, here it gave us the opportunity to suspend them.
Hmm.
And I think that's really what you were getting at, is the suspension of beliefs rather than the changing of them, or at least this is how it worked for me.
Hmm.
I had to say, okay, everything's sacred, nothing's sacred. Now what? Am I crazy? Right, with my experiences and things like this. Perry Knopper asked me a question in an octopus movement gathering the other day. It was a 20-hour marathon. And he says, Zen, what do you do what's your overriding question about reality? I said, am I crazy? Right? Because the outer reflection, right? You wonder, right? When you have these weird shit experiences happen to you, you wonder if it's really true or not, and you think you might be crazy. Well, to ask yourself if you are, and then look at your experience and what's happening, what can be reflected, those that are validating, even those that aren't, right? It gives you an opportunity to test the truth.
What you're talking about right now is such a poignant issue for me because I have this whole thing also when I teach workshops around what is reality, right?
Mhm.
What is real? And one of the prime first points I make is that what is real is not limited by what is physical. Because if we have a dream and then we wake up from that dream, everything we did in that dream hasn't affected our physical reality. But if we have a certain encounter in the dream and we learn a certain something from that encounter, and then we meet a person and talk to them in real life later that day and we respond to them differently than we would have if we hadn't had that dream has a reality. Or if we sit here and we think about the things that really bother us and the things that are really miserable in life, we're dumping all kinds of certain hormones and neurotransmitters in our system.
Influencers,
And we're
right?
gonna right. And yet if we sit here and we think about what we're grateful for and what we love, and we're also doing the result reverse. And we are creating a result where our immune systems are boosted. And the consequences of having a boosted immune system is our life looks different. And so
Yeah, hormones are
even
totally different.
the
You're in fear,
immaterial.
cortisol is flooding your body and you clench up.
Right.
And
So
if you're
the
not, dopamine and serotonin and all of those,
oxytocin and
hormones,
endorphins.
oxytocin, right?
Yep,
You
yep.
just, and you're
And
flooded with it
so
and you feel differently because of that. You actually do feel more connected that way.
exactly. And so when I talk about reality, there's also another dimension that I talk about, which is objective reality and creative reality. Now, what is the difference there, right? So
Does
objective.
confabulation fit in there somewhere?
Well, let's talk about this is exactly where when you
Yeah.
say am I crazy and like you try and think about what it means to be crazy. When we say that somebody is crazy, it usually means that they're saying things about things they're experiencing that no one else in the room is experiencing. Now, of course, maybe they are seeing a cat flying through the air. We couldn't say because what's inside a person's brain, right? Like we can't know. But if
Exactly.
9 people out of 10 in that room are not seeing a flying cat and one person is, we call the person who's seeing the flying cat crazy, right? Because their reality doesn't match ours. But there's this whole piece around, okay, there's subjective reality that we sort of define as being a consensus reality. If 9 out of 10 or 99 out of 100
Based
people
on agreements.
this is real, then we agree that that's real. I'm sorry, what do
Right.
you say?
I said it's based on agreements.
Based on agree, right? But then there's the creative reality, which is based on what, a lot of people attribute this saying to, to Henry Ford, but of course, this has been said for thousands of years, before him. If you say you can, or if you say you can't, you're right.
Right.
That is like the creative reality where it's basically based on our decision. If we decide, no, I can do it, what's going to happen? We're going to start
Don't
making our
think
decision.
about that pink elephant.
So,
Right? Mind doesn't hear don't, do or do not, right? Like
uh,
Yoda. There is no try. It's either do or do not. Well, the mind
right,
doesn't hear do or do not. It focuses on whatever the topic is.
right. So if you say I can, then you are going to make the kinds of actions which, and you're going to believe the kinds of things that lead you to take the kinds of actions which make it possible. Now, if you say something like, I can grow bird wings at this moment and fly to Tokyo in the next hour, then, you're kind of going into a range where it's like, yeah, yeah, bloody unlikely, man, but
Yeah,
hey, the
it's a
right,
different realm. Many don't travel.
I would say if you're in your dreams and you say that, then actually that stuff does happen. I've totally had things happen
I
in my
know.
dream where I just
I've
decide
had,
something happened
have you
and it
ever
happens.
had, you just brought up a question. Have you ever had a moment of bilocation?
I have not, but I have to tell you that I had one very profound experience of remote viewing, which I did not believe I was going to have, or I did not know, that I was going to have or whatever.
Yeah,
But
most stuff you don't know can happen until it does.
yeah, I just had in this exercise, the person facilitating was like, "Okay, close your eyes. Da, da, da. I have the coordinates of something, and I want you to close your eyes. Just we're all going to focus together, and then I want you to draw what you see." And I drew this falcon looking, bird looking thing, whatever, and it was a building that was the point. And I drove to that. We drove to that building later, and I looked, and there was the thing that I drew was on the side of the building. It was in Long Beach, and I was just like, that is crazy sauce. And that's again where you would be concerned telling people that because they might think that you're crazy. But
Oh,
that
Lynn
is
Buchanan and Ingo Swann wouldn't.
right, right. But that is a thing where I have to in my life stand somewhere. You got to stand somewhere, right? And I
Well,
had
you
that
got to stand for
experience.
something or you fall for anything.
Right. Yeah, right. So I have to say, like, I had that experience. I also am aware that, yeah, the CIA did experiments. There was the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab, and they came up with some really, really interesting things that are true about human consciousness and perception that are far beyond our normal Newtonian set of understandings about physical reality.
Well, and it brings out the state of neurodiversity, right? I didn't think I was different when I was a kid. Today, with the octopus group, these are all neurodiverse, nonlinear thinkers. It's like, and I'm seeing all the different types of ancillary behaviors, right? And verbiage and how people are talking. I was like, whoa, I'm seeing myself, scattered through all of this and realizing, wow, I was that way as a kid. No wonder. And fortunately, I was highly functional. My parents really did a good job at helping me to be functional, and I could travel in different social circles and stuff. Um, it still made me realize that, even that young, with an extremely high IQ, they were afraid of it, didn't know to tell me about it, and there were no programs to support it.
Mm,
Today, that's different. And this diversity that we're noticing, it's not a DEI thing. right? Although that's, I think that's a false flag, right? In a way, it really is the evolution of humanity that is bringing us to new levels of activity and sensitivity because we need it. That's part of our natural evolutionary process, just like the universe. You were talking, 14 billion years ago, poof, right? Here we are. And now today, here we are. What's next? It
Yeah.
appears that as the universe has chosen to experience itself through us, that it's going to get finer and finer in detail as it is evolving rather than fall into entropy, which kind of blows the whole second law of thermodynamics away, except for closed systems like man has created.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation in which we find ourselves where there are things, like the law of thermodynamics that regards entropy, but then we also see, a self-organizing principle that is so profound. I mean, just to
Hmm.
think that gas and dust alone organized itself into this, like, and is at the super intense level of complexity at which we find the functioning systems. And so
I have a
you
theory
have to
about
say,
that.
where is the other law that is the maybe I'm unaware of it, maybe or
I think we
whatever.
all are
If the
yet
law of
because we don't
entropy,
see it.
what's the other law of self-organizing, emergent, synergistic, principles? Like what is that?
I have a theory in that it moves through us, in us, around us, and that there is an intelligence far beyond our recognition that's in a basic model, right? That model being the Trinity. Um, where do we see that, right? Every religion, major religion, has a Trinity of some kind, right? It both in the macro and in the practice belief system. So where might that look, or where might that be in a microsystem? So we got the macro, right? Where there are three spheres of power, let's say. We don't know exactly what they are, but they combine in order to create the physical reality, both you and I, and our solar system and beyond, right? So where does that show up? Proton, electron, and neutron at a micro level. There's only one thing, one element that doesn't fit that model, and that's hydrogen. So hydrogen is the most plentiful gas in the universe, powers the sun, and is the bonding agent for a DNA helix. That's an interesting connectivity there. Is it possible that consciousness actually is that third part of that model? The dark matter that we think is there, that's actually consciousness, intelligence of some kind, that is encased within this, for lack of a better, etheric grid, so to speak, or these lines of force that are connected, where those tiglies, if you will, or the um, what do they call them? The strings, the vibrating strings. There was a term for them. Quirks, quarks. No, I forget. Be that as it may, you understand what I'm saying. Is it possible that that could be what we're missing in that science model that proves that the interconnectedness and the consciousness actually flows through that? For instance, the Tao, the yin and yang. It's a two-dimensional symbol. What if it's three-dimensional? What if it actually symbolized the light on and light off and the pulsing through our DNA helix? If you look at it, it's set up to where that symbol shows the double helix.
Hmm. Yeah,
Could that create
I
the
have no
spin that gives us the
idea.
material?
I have no idea about
I don't
that.
either, but you know enough, you start asking questions, and it's just like,
Yeah.
it's like the
No,
Higgs boson.
I do feel really strongly about the symbol, about the Trinity, or the symbol. Like, this is the symbol that I wear around my neck,
Sure.
and I have for many years. I don't wear any other symbol, and it is like a representation of the three. And I find that there is such a power in just understanding how many dimensions along which that trinity takes effect. So, for example, past, present, future, right? In Hebrew, one, two, and three is literally man, woman, and child. And there are so many places where like observer, observed, and observing. Like there's the thing that's
Right.
being observed, the thing that's observing, but then there's the process itself as a whole. And as we know through quantum physics, it is literally the process of observation that crystallizes a sea of potentiality into one particular form, one particular moment. And I find, Schrodinger's cat, the whole concept of superposition of states and the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, where the more we know about the location of a subatomic particle, the less we know about its trajectory and its velocity. But the more we know about its trajectory and velocity, the more its exact position becomes kind of fuzzy. And the beam splitter experiment, where we actually like find like, okay, we fire this photon through a beam splitter, and so it chooses this path or it chooses this path if we set it up like that. And so we fire it 1,000 times, about 500 times it takes this path, about 500 times it takes this path. But then if we fire it and we wait the length of time for it to pass the beam splitter, so it's definitely taken this path or this path, but then we slip a beam splitter into this place where those two paths intersect. What appears on the beam splitter is an interference pattern. So that means that literally we fire this photon, it makes a choice to go this way or go that way, but there's always this like, let's say it chose to go this way in physical reality, there's always this latent possibility that's just existing, enfolded in time space. And if we put something such that it can interact with itself, because light is the boundary of, speed of light is the boundary of all motion or whatever, it means that light is everywhere at once. And so as soon as it goes this way, and then you put it something where it can interact with itself, this just winks into existence so that it can interact with itself. So it's just such a
Quantum entanglement.
fascinating like transcendence of our idea of rationality and logic and either or thinking. And it gets me like to the point where I feel like consciousness, and the experience of love within consciousness, to bring us all the way back to what you were talking about in the beginning between love and fear, this kind of, you know, um, distinction and this division of, that consciousness like is always this thing which is seeking love or seeking the experience of wholeness. Because right when we're in love, whether it's you're on the dance floor and there's 1,000 people around you and everybody's dancing and everybody just like knows like this is the perfect, but there's nowhere else we want to be, or whether you're
Right.
holding your loved one in your arms and you're looking in their eyes, those are the moments where it's like there are no more questions, there are no more goals or achievements. It's like we're already there, right? So love is kind of that sense, or what I call love is the sense of harmony when we feel, or when you look at a painting you love,
Exactly.
something about
That
that
perfect word.
painting.
It's the sense of harmony that doesn't negate, because we're humans, right? We experience chaos, and there are patterns we haven't recognized yet, usually, perhaps all the time. Yet there's that essence, that harmony that for that moment that exists. How do we extend those moments?
Mm.
Can
Yeah,
we?
so I actually have a whole program that I'm developing called Infinite Energy, and it is
I
it
wouldn't have imagined that at all.
and it is literally about like understanding that what we all really want is not a thing. It's not a person, it's not a car, it's not a job. It's a feeling
It's
that
to
we
love and be
imagine we're going to
loved.
have if we get that thing. We want that thing because we believe that we're going to have a certain feeling inside us when we get the thing. But a lot of people, so many people, unfortunately, drive hard year after year, and finally they get the thing that they thought they wanted, and then they still somehow feel empty inside and they wonder why. And it's because they don't understand that it's the feeling that you're looking for. And actually, all the neurotransmitter, all the chemicals, as we were talking about earlier, dopamine, endorphins, oxytocin, and serotonin, these kinds of chemicals that give us these feelings or are associated with these feelings, they're already within us. And we actually can tap into our ability to express those and to experience those without the need of an external goal. But here's where also, like, again, the truth, like, is it the truth? Is it not the truth? That kind of breaks down at a certain point because I don't think we're designed as humans to just sit there and be able to trigger our own neurochemicals and just sit there and
Hmm.
feel bliss all the time. Like, I think we're designed to go out and accomplish things, but not to be attached to those accomplishments.
We're designed to be in community, commune, right? Come unity. Interesting how those things are there. Yet, and even now, our experience often depends on from where we are perceiving things, perspective. Again, back to where, even in science, right? You were talking about quantum physics and um, the split experiment. It reminded me of the Higgs boson experiment, right? These
Mhm.
guys were looking for the Higgs boson, the God particle. First of all, it doesn't really ring for me that a particle without mass would give mass to other particles. That seems a little odd. Although with consciousness, I suppose it's possible. However, when you run two protons together at near light speeds and you have an explosion, I don't know that it's going to create fuse a third particle out of that. It would seem the explosion would actually rip a hole in the fabric between dimensions, which we know exists, right? In
Hmm.
theory, right? So the scientists, though, didn't see a particle in their data. They saw what they determined to be the evidence of the decay of a particle. So they projected a particle there rather than saying, what else could it be? And they were so locked in that I had a TA from Lawrence Krauss um, class, I guess. Lawrence Krauss is a world-renowned physicist. He came to our science cafe and he was talking about the God participle or particle. Yeah, I wrote a book called The God Participle. Um, I asked him the question, is it possible that it was a rip in the fabric that they didn't, that was repairing itself? And he looked at me like a deer in the headlights. They had not even thought about that. And I find that odd, especially with the radical curiosity that scientists have about understanding reality and the possibilities of it.
Well, I think that when you start talking about other dimensions, I think that a lot of scientists do kind of hesitate to go there just because at this point, who wants to be the first one to say the
Well, they
thing,
express it
you know?
numerically, but they have no direct experience of it from which to relate. Now, there are processes. There's a guy named William Swigert from 1950s that put together a multi-plane awareness technique that takes people through 9 planes of consciousness. Do they explore that? No, that's seen as oh, that's not possible, right?
Yeah,
Yet there's
again,
thousands
it's
of people who went through that.
it's a a place where if things are just in people's heads, a lot of people just don't even want to go there
Mm,
because they feel like they don't want to be the one who's it's suggested about them that they're crazy. They want to be very they want to have credibility, and they want to be serious scientists and whatever. And I understand that
right.
because
Yeah.
I have known people who have started to take their ideas about what they think, and they just start acting on them without necessarily like doing you know again,
Well,
here's
that's where
one
you
of those
test your truth, right? You
here's one
test your
yeah,
truth
well,
and it will prove itself. And if it proves itself wrong, then you got to, you know, you
you
have
got
to.
to adjust,
Like
right?
when somebody shows up, however they are, believe them, right? Don't think them to be. We have a tendency to want to see others in the ways that we want to see them, not necessarily who they are.
You mean believe them to be sincere, or take them at their word and give them the benefit of the
Just
doubt?
And when a person shows up and they show you their behaviors, their activities, whatever it is about them, they show you their being in those few moments. Believe it. You're going to get all kinds of sensory perceptions as to how they are if you're looking, right? If you're not naive enough just to believe the words and what you see with the outer eyes, there's other energy there. And people often show up in different perspectives or different masks that they believe to be true that aren't necessarily so.
Yeah, I I have this. It's another one of the sort of axes along which truth sort of
Let me
revolves.
be clear
And I'm talking
for a
about like,
second. I didn't want to take
what?
myself out of that. I've had masks too. We all have masks that we show up with sometimes depending on the environment that we're in.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from, and I actually support the idea to at the start when you first meet somebody to just take them at their word and give them the benefit of the doubt. Not necessarily, trust them with your life or whatever, but
Trust
definitely
but
like
verify, right?
in the yeah, right, trust but verify. But in the context of the conversation, it does open up a lot more possibility to you know take them at their word and just be curious about what it is they're experiencing, because even if what they're experiencing isn't factual or whatever, sometimes insights can be gained through the way, just looking
Very
at the way
true.
they're perceiving things. I feel like one of those axes, like I said, of truth that we're kind of touching on again is the whole truth. Like, you should, not care about how others think about you. You should just, follow your own truth, and you should, right? And a lot of people these days, actually, particularly on LinkedIn, I've seen these kind of things like, you should never care about what other people think. And I think that, while that is good advice in particular for people who are very timid, like if you're a person who naturally sort of
Right.
doubts yourself,
Yeah.
then
Rather introverted.
you might need to, it's kind of like the truth that Neo heard from the Oracle, right? Like, is it actually the truth, or is it the truth that you needed to hear in that moment to send you in the direction that's going to help you flourish in your life? So for
Mhm.
those people, the truth of the statement, you shouldn't care about the opinions of others, right, might be that's true for them, because they need to hear that to lead them to find more balance in their lives. But I think everybody, has probably known at least one or two people in their lives where they don't need to hear that advice. They already don't care about what anybody else thinks. They already just take their own thoughts about things and believe that it's true. And they charge forward, kind of almost blind to the feedback they might be receiving from other people, where other people are like, hey, actually, what you're saying is, either A, really hurting people's feelings that you might want to care about, or second, they're actually just not accurate, because here's some evidence of its inaccuracy, whatever. But if you're a person who takes this truth over here and you apply it to this person, then you're going to find that actually it sends them too far in that direction. And the truth that this person needs to hear is more like, be humble and
Mhm.
receive feedback from your community in a graceful way or whatever. That might be the truth
As
that they
best
need
you
to hear.
can, anyway. Right. And this brings up the paradox,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not talking about my purple ones in the closet. Um, the paradox is that it doesn't matter what other people think, feel, or believe about you, what you believe about yourself.
Mm,
And it doesn't matter what you believe about yourself, but how others perceive you.
mm,
So there's
mm,
this delicate balance, and you just illustrated that, right? So you've got to be willing to test your truth, but if it doesn't fit with the collective, maybe it's not time yet. It still may be true. You've got to experience that harmony, which the listening, the observation, the engagement, the love that you are in order to receive those perspectives is ever present. And that makes that paradox unified.
Yeah. Yeah. So I
More like a
think,
Mobius strip than a paradox.
right. Well, that is a powerful illustration of paradox, a one-sided object, right? The Mobius strip. Yeah, and
Hmm.
I love that we've come, near the end here, to wrap back around to that main point of love. Um, and I'll share that, like, one of the most powerful lessons that I ever learned in life is from, among the largest near-death experience research studies that was done. They found that, many people had a common experience. Not everybody has the same experience when they die and come back from the dead, but there are a whole lot of people throughout time and across the world in different cultures that have these similar experiences. One being, some of them are so cliche, right? Like the feeling of going through a tunnel and
Right.
then the light at the end of the tunnel emerging, the being or beings of light. And, if you happen to be a Christian, sometimes they look like God and the angels. Sometimes if you're a Hindu, they tend to look like the Hindu gods or whatever, but there are these energetic beings. And then they say,
And the
welcome.
retention from your belief system.
Yeah, right. And then, this is your life, and you get to review your life, and you get to stay in any moment of your life for as long as you want, kind of hang out and re-experience not only what you experience, but you apparently get to experience how everyone else experienced you.
Hmm.
And so in that
Because
moment,
there's no separation at that point. There's no biological separation.
it's just consciousness. You get to
Right.
be conscious in that moment. And eventually, the theme all the way across all these people throughout time, they're written reports from before, video or even audio recordings were happening. We find that the universal, pretty much across all these people, their experience is that they awaken to the fact, oh, life is about love. Life is about how I said yes to love and I connected with people, or there were other moments where I was too afraid and I said no to love and I disconnected, and that was my experience. And so then when you come to this like aha moment of like, oh, that's what life's about, your life review ends as if that was like the point of that life review. And you talk to the
Sure.
beings and they're like, well, we're so glad that you know now what life is about. And almost every quick case, they say, but it's not your time yet. Go back now. And then boom, people wake up, having the water pumped out of their lungs if they were drowning, or they wake up
Sure.
on the operating table getting shocked or whatever.
Or
And
they
of
just come
course,
back and take a deep breath after the, phenomenal experience.
yeah, right. And then so, bottom line is that, if there is this message from beyond the grave or whatever, like the, largest number of people who have died and come back, they have these common experiences that demonstrate that life
Mhm.
is about love. And I don't think anybody has to go very far, to recognize the truth of that in their own life. We feel like the best moments of our lives, when we think about them, when I was the happiest, it's when we were in love, whether it's we're in love with a sport we're doing, or we're in love with a person we're with, or we're in love, whatever it is. And I've even broken down this system where love, like, you can look at every single aspect of human culture and say that everything in human culture was created because of love of some kind. Somebody loved, or was fearful, or was afraid that there was not going to be love. And I associated all of them with the different chakras. So like the root chakra is people who love to box, or people who love to climb mountains, or climb, or, like they like to risk their lives. It's like the root chakra love. And then there's the obviously the sexual chakra love. There's
I
all
had
kinds.
been on the mountain, but I was belayed.
Yeah, I also was belayed my few opportunities to rock climb. I was also belayed. I was not
I'm not going to free climb. Uh-uh.
yeah, free climbing. That's pretty wild stuff. And then yeah, there's the sexual love, and then obviously like the solar plexus love is more about producing and creating and moving and developing, and then the agape kind of heart love, love between family members, love between friends. the love of expressing yourself, whether that's creating music or dancing or whatever it is. The like throat chakra love is like the expression, and then there's the witnessing love, the just drinking in love. Like I there's a lot of people who don't necessarily like to paint, but they love to look at others paintings. And then the love of that just sense of total union with everything, that spiritual connection that some people have their love kind of triggered more in certain areas than others. And so it's one of the most important things for us to do is recognize, how do you experience love most easily? And are you doing the kinds of things in your life which are connecting you to that experience so that you can say, at the end of your life, you lived it to the fullest,
Yeah. Yeah. Can you? And will you? And if so, when? Right? There was one of the processes. Can you change? Could you? If all this has happened, could you change? Well, yeah. Would you? Probably. When? Oh my God. Oh my God. You mean now? And yet, like you've experienced in the bus, right? That blink of an eye, right? That total connection. It just happens in an instance. That's all you need. I heard once that read once that the speed of thought is 841 trillion miles per second.
That's interesting. I don't know how you would measure that. But to go back,
Well, it
actually,
definitely wasn't measured by anybody from here.
I know, right? So I actually I'm glad you brought that back around, because there were three distinct things that happened for me on the bus, and I only mentioned two of them, right? So I
Okay.
mentioned that I had
Better
this
be good
experience.
close. All right.
I I had this experience of going beyond fear and into bliss, and now I have this reference point. I was totally sober. I have this reference point of what total bliss feels like, and that it is possible, and what it feels like and what it's based on is our sense of connection with everything. And then the
Mhm.
second thing was that I just redefined the word God to mean reality. And then so then now I believe in God, but not in any religious sense, more of a spiritual sense. And then the third thing that happened for me is I realized that 99% of human culture would look different if people had had that experience. So my entire life mission became, how do I share the experience of unity consciousness? And so that's why my
You and me
Skyfire Arts,
both,
my
brother.
my company's my company's mission, Skyfire Arts, is how do I use spectacular entertainment? Because people don't tend to listen as much if you lecture as if you're telling a story or if you're playing, right? So,
Especially today, the 1 to 3 minute TikTok videos.
right, right. So how do I
That's
use
become the,
spectacular
the Google
entertainment?
for the Gen X or Gen Zs.
Uh-huh.
That's just phenomenal. These short clips,
Yeah, it's a trip. It's a trip. And
micro
it's interesting
moments.
how you can't really convey a very profound or deep concept as easily in these sound bites. But I am, I'm on TikTok, and I am posting and stuff, and I'm feeling like, my mission to promote ecological awareness, or that experience of unity and personal empowerment, the sense that you have the control over your destiny that you really want, like by
Because
choosing
you
your
have
own thought.
choice,
Right, right.
ultimately. Michael, this has been phenomenal. I love it. I love you, man. You're just a wonderful being. Um,
I love you too, man.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you.
What would, and that's, men aren't used to being able to say that and mean it, right? Because it's a whole different thing. It's a whole different level of love that we're able to share. And I appreciate that. What kind of advice would you give to folks for everyday development of a discipline, let's say?
Okay. So I feel like, what really helped me is that system that I talked about. So if people want to find me, I'm Skyfire Arts on Instagram. They can reach out to me. I have, skyfireacademy.org is my website. They can reach out to me there and get a little more information. But the bottom line is that, for me, I had a certain system, and I actually developed an acronym. It goes Remadradri, Half a Toti, and po breva meta. And so these are, so if you do the same thing every single morning, so I rehearse, the first thing I do is I rehearse my perfect life, or rehearse my perfect day, or first thing in the morning I rehearse, I envision, because we're going through delta brainwave patterns, through theta, through alpha into beta as we're waking up. So if you can catch yourself right when you're waking up and envision and feel the feeling of what the future you're dreaming yourself into feels like, that's an incredibly powerful way to program your subconscious to use your reticular activating system and filter your reality for the kinds of things that are going to lead you to that future. I can't get
Hmm.
into all that right now, but bottom line is that remadradery, so rehearse, make the bed, dress in my workout clothes, and then drink water. And then hatha toti is hair, face, tongue, and teeth. Because by stimulating your scalp or splashing cold water on your face, scraping your tongue, brushing your teeth, you actually stimulate all kinds of endorphins. You wake yourself up, give yourself some
Right.
energy. And then po breva meta is poetry, breath work, visualization, meditation, and dance party. And so that's what I do every single morning. I have this ritual. So having but starting with, okay, so you said what advice? Start with one thing. Start with only one thing. And, if you just start with, for example, remadradery, just rehearsing as you're waking up, rehearsing, what does my best life feel like? Where am I? Who am I with? What am I feeling like? What's true for me? Is my job better? Is my relationship better? Whatever it is, live there for at least a few minutes right as you're waking up. And then make the bed. And if you want, I'll send a link, or post a link about Admiral McRaven, no relation. I'm Ravenwood and he's McRaven. But he did a talk where he talked about making your bed, and he's a Navy SEAL commander. And he has an amazing thing about making your bed, and how that one small victory actually gets you some inertia for your day. So Rema, and then Dre is dress, just I usually have a lot of blankets, so I need to dress, and then drink water. First thing in the morning, drink some water, get hydration. And if you just do that, that will anchor a morning ritual that then later you can add 5 minutes of meditation, or you can add some breath
Hmm.
work, or you can add
Yeah,
whatever
get one,
you
get one thing down for a little bit. Don't overwhelm yourself. It's like all these programs, that they throw all this stuff at you and expect it to do it all, and you do for a little bit, and then you go, "Oh my God, I can't do this anymore." Well, yeah, be easier on yourself. This doesn't have to be hard work. It actually ought to be easy because it is so natural and best for you.
It can be easy. And if you're in a cohort with a certain group of people and you're all like pushing to do a certain thing, you can go further and do more. But I think I agree with you. If you're on your own and you're just looking to just start small. Start small and get a victory. And then go a little bit bigger and get a victory. And then that will give you the inertia you
And
need.
as you celebrate your victories, then you'll want to do more naturally.
Exactly.
Bingo. Super. Michael, thank you so much. This has been absolutely amazing. We went to all kinds of different levels and realms and opportunities for our listeners to explore themselves too.
Mm.
Yeah. Don't forget to listen and subscribe. Thank you, Michael. Namaste and in luck, catch. Thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and for Michael and I, well, not necessarily Michael, but for me, I'll see you next time.